and helping families to build healthy sleep habits for life. I'm the creator of a new program called Sleep Steps, and I'm coming to you today with some free training, session 1 of 5, where we're kicking off a lot of sleep education because we believe every family deserves the gift of sleep here at Tiny Transitions, and I'm going to help you get some more of it this week. So please say hello. Tell me where you are from in the chats, whether you're catching us live or catching us on the replay, and how old your little one is. Also, anything you might be struggling with. I'm live and everything's up here. So I try to take time to make sure I'm answering your questions and ensure that you can all get your best sleep. So let me give you a rundown of how I typically do these trainings because I talk a lot. There is an amazing workbook that helps you to condense and consolidate everything that I am sharing with you. I will go ahead and pop that into the show notes and into the description so that you can make sure to download that from the chat. And then what I'm also going to do is make it available at any point in the future. So you can always refer back to it. We have so much great resources and free information for you. And my job here is to get you more sleep, and we're very good at it. So with that said, we are going to kick things off first and foremost with how this next 5 days is going to run. I'm going to pop the PDF into the chat so you can see that. And what I do when I host sessions like this is first context, right? Age and stage. So families that come to hire Tiny Transitions, whether it's myself or a member of my amazing team, the Slumber Squad, are looking for sleep education. They've come home from the hospital and you might have a newborn and you're struggling a bit with all the things as many newborn parents do. You might have an infant who maybe should be on a little bit more of a structure and routine and you just can't seem to nail it, or they're not sleeping through the night. And with toddlers, we start to notice a little bit more behaviors and boundary setting, that independence that they want, but they just might not quite be ready to have. And we're going to cover all of that this week. This session is geared toward children between the ages of 0 and 4. It is going to vary. Obviously, a 2-month-old is different than a 2-year-old, but you're going to see the similarities in what I'm educating you on. So today's session is session number 1, and I'm talking about 3 simple shifts that you can make or pay attention to in your child's day that can actually help them sleep better tonight. I'm going to talk to you about some of the sleep education and fundamentals when it comes to sleep training and, what makes a child a good sleeper. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about the number 1 mistake that parents make with sleep. So we're going to dive into that. It'll be the same time and same place. If you're catching us on the replay, you can probably binge watch. But if you're catching this live, today is Monday. We're going to do that session on Tuesday. Wednesday, we're going to talk about what the ideal bedtime looks like, ideal bedtime routine for children at every age and stage, and then how you execute on it. So it's not an anxiety-induced part of the day as it is for so many parents, but actually a calm and peaceful, predictable routine that helps your child to sleep well and give you some time to get some things done back in your life that are always, seem to be piling up like laundry. On Thursday, we're going to dive into sleep training methods. I think there's a lot of analogies out there. There's a lot of different methods. And I'm going to break them all down for you. So that's going to be on Thursday, or session 4. And then session 5, we're going to talk all about sleep regressions. So the next 5 days, if you're catching us live, there's going to be a lot of education around sleep. But my goal is to help you to sleep better, to answer your questions and be that support that I know so many new parents need. And I'm here to be that. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. And we're going to first talk about sleep foundations, right? So every child is born with the ability to sleep. And, some would kind of debate whether they can sleep well or not. But, when it talk about total sleep needs in the day, right? Newborns, when they're born, need to still sleep 16 to 18 hours in a 24-hour period. So they get a lot of sleep in an entire day. They basically wake, eat, and sleep. And that's pretty much the first several weeks of your life. As things around 4 months start to normalize, your child is going to move to kind of that 12 to 14 hours of total daytime sleep, sometimes upwards of 16 hours. It really depends on the day and how well they're doing. And then, over the age of 1, things start to kind of more normalize to about 10 to 13 hours. And, again, each baby's going to be a bit different, but we're going to help you get some balance there. So when we talk about ages and stages and how much sleep do kids need, it really kind of starts first with hormones, right? So every child is born with several different types of hormones and things that are keeping their body, pretty well balanced, right? Newborns have 2 stages of sleep. 50% of the time they're in REM sleep. 50% of the time they're in non-REM sleep. That is the only time in their entire life that they are going to sleep like that. Okay. It's either deep sleep or light sleep. And then around 3 to 4 months, where a lot of people go, oh, is this the 3 month sleep regression? Right? Things change. And so what happens is between 3 and 4 months, you actually go from stage based sleep to cycle based sleep. And all of a sudden, baby might have been sleeping a bit longer and now they're up. Oh, and they're up again. Oh, and they're up again. And now they're getting up 3, 4 times a night. And you're like, are they hungry? Do they have to burp? Is their diaper wet? Like, what do we got going on here? You're chronically sleep deprived. Your child is chronically sleep deprived, and everybody's really not eating well and not feeling at their best. Okay. So that's a big shift that happens around 3 to 4 months, but we can stop it and we can try to bring some balance to it, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But that is an evolution, right? When your child wakes in the morning, they're building up a neurotransmitter called adenosine. So when you wake, even as an adult, your adenosine levels rise. Okay. When a baby naps, when your toddler naps, when your newborn naps, the adenosine levels fall. Okay. So you've got this really nice balance of like awake adenosine rises, asleep adenosine falls. Okay. That is a really nice ebb and flow that you want to have throughout the entire day. What starts to happen is one, parents don't even know how much kids need to sleep. They don't know how long their child should be awake between sleeping, and they don't know what total amount of sleep and what a schedule should look like for their baby in a day. So things all of a sudden start to turn into hormone stew. And here's why. When your child is awake for too long, so let's say, for example, a 7 month old should only really be awake for 3 hours. Okay. Well, if they're up for five, what happens is if the ideal target is right here and they're up past that ideal target, the brain goes, hey, you trying to stay awake? Here's some stimulants, right? So it triggers stimulant hormones, and then your baby gets a second wind. Well, the problem is it's like they snorted a pixie stick and now we're trying to go down for a nap, like not conducive to sleep because they're kind of overstimulated, right? So the brain's trying to help you out, thinking you're trying to keep them awake, when in reality, they're really tired. So you can start to see it with a lot of tears or maybe fussy eating or just total discomfort and like manic crying. You're like, what do you need? I'm trying to help you, little baby. And that is usually why, right? Because you missed the ideal window for when a child should go down. You want things to stay in this nice balance. But I recognize as a new parent myself with 2 kids, right? You've got just so much going on. You got to make sure they eat enough. You got to make sure they're comfortable, that they don't have gas, that they had a good burp, that you're watching wake windows. Oh, and you're not doing too much to get them to sleep, but enough to get them to sleep, right? And the whole first year is kind of a blur. So, what I really encourage parents to look at is paying attention to those sleep needs, because that sleep need is going to ebb and flow throughout the day. When a child needs to go to bed, so at 3 months, it's 90 minutes. At 5 months, it's about 2.5 hours, right? And then somewhere between 6 and 7 months, it kind of baselines out till 12 months. Then around 12 months, you get sort of more on a set nap schedule versus an awake window. Okay. You have to pay attention to all of that. And it's really the number one lesson out of 3 today is managing your child's schedule. Okay. You cannot put a newborn on a schedule, but what you can do is you can watch their wake windows and make sure that you're allowing their levels to be balanced. Because as I mentioned, you have adenosine, right? Neurotransmitter. Then you have adrenaline and cortisol, stimulant hormones. Okay. Then you have melatonin. Melatonin highest ocularly when the sun goes down. So your melatonin levels at bedtime will naturally start to rise. And then as you go through the rest of the night to sleep, those levels are going to fall off. Okay. And then somewhere between 4 and 6 in the morning, it's your coldest body temperature and your highest level of cortisol, which is your baby's morning cup of coffee, right? So you've got hormone stew that you've got to keep in balance. Otherwise, things get all sorts of chaotic and overtired sets in, right? Overtired means your kid isn't eating well. It means they are not napping as well. It often means they need support to sleep. It means early morning wakings, a fighting tear-filled bedtime, and then multiple overnight and early morning wakings. And it kind of just keeps this hamster wheel going because they had a really rough night. Then they have a really rough day. Then they have a really rough night because of the really rough day. And you see how you get in this circular pattern and it just doesn't end. Okay. So what you have to look at is your first shift is looking at wake windows. Okay. They're very important. They're very, very, very important in the workbook I shared. And over on our website, we have tons of free information at tinytransitions.com/learn. There's wake window guides, there's baby dressing guides, there's poop charts, there's stomach size charts, all the things that are going to help you to understand. Now, whether you have a newborn or an infant or a toddler, what should the ideal schedule look like? Somewhere between 12 and 15 months is when a child goes to one nap, and you're not looking at wake windows, you're looking at a fixed nap time. Okay. And we'll talk about bedtime and timing of all of that to keep the schedule in check in just a minute. Because the second thing is actually the second most important thing when it comes to how well children are growing and they're developing, especially the first year of life. And that is, you might have guessed, intake. So babies need the same amount of milk the entire first year of life, every single month, every single day. Okay. Doesn't change. A lot of people think, oh, well, as they grow, they drink more. They actually don't. They drink 24 to 32 ounces of milk in a given 24-hour period. Their belly gets bigger, right? So it goes from a walnut to an egg to an orange, right? And it continues to grow through that first year so that the amount they can take at a feeding grows, the total intake is the same. So you see, they start to get more milk in the day as their capacity grows. And with the independent ability to settle and with the right amount of milk, they have the capability to sleep through the night, which is going to be different for every baby because they have to get 24 to 32 ounces of milk and they have to have the independent ability to settle in the right environment in a safe sleep space so that they can consolidate and get that good sleep overnight. That's why when parents say to me, like, what age should a baby sleep through the night? It depends. It depends if you're bottle feeding and you can measure every ounce to know for sure that they're getting the right amount in the intake in the day. If you are exclusively breastfeeding, you can do weighted transfers. I was a huge fan personally because I am very type A and it is me. I ordered a $60 scale off Amazon and every time, and I didn't do it 24/7, but for the most part, I weighed my babies every time I fed them because I wanted to know quantitatively, like how much milk were you getting? Because it wasn't indicative of like the time they were eating. As a lactation counselor, I knew that it didn't matter. You could nurse for 5 minutes and sometimes pull as much milk as at 20. It depends on the latch, the efficiency of the eater, the letdown, all these things, right? So it wasn't black and white for me. And I wanted to know, right? So a weighted transfer for several feedings a day gives you a good baseline to go, okay, baby's fed enough, right? Now, when they wake overnight, what else are they looking for, right? Which we're going to talk about. But intake is super important, okay? Breast milk and formula, 24 to 32 ounces. If you are starting with your baby to incorporate solids and your baby is still waking up at night, to eat, especially even once, frankly, but once, twice, three times, right? You might want to dial back on the solids in the daytime, especially if they're eating applesauce, which isn't as macronutrient dense as milk because it's taking up space. They need that milk to get that milk in the day, right? Because if they go to the Vegas buffet at 3 a.m. and get crab legs and bacon, they don't want breakfast at 7 a.m. They just don't. Okay. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to your baby's feeding schedule. Now, I use that term loosely because people say you can't put a baby on a schedule. You can. Okay. I find that most babies who have colic are also fed on demand. Now, that's not to state that every baby who's fed on demand has colic. It just in my private sleep coaching practice, when a parent tells me their child has colic and they seek sleep coaching services from us, and I ask them, is your baby fed on demand? 9 times out of 10, they say yes. When we get babies sleeping better, independent skill and ability, and we get them eating on a schedule, right? Regular full feedings throughout the day. So their belly has time to empty and fully digest. So it's not getting agitated and everything coming up. That colic goes away. Okay. So I've done this for a long time and with a lot of babies. And so that experience has allowed me to make these statements because I see it in my practice every day. And so what that means is ideally you need 24 to 32 ounces and you want to pace it about every 3 hours across the day, right? So does that mean that if a newborn is hungry, you don't feed them? Absolutely not. You always feed a hungry baby. What I'm saying is you want to pay attention to what else, right? If they just fed a half hour ago on both breasts, they're probably not hungry. Why don't you check the next thing, which would be a trapped burp, right? Or gas and discomfort. Are they scrunching their legs? Is their belly really hard, right? You've got to go through this mental checklist when you're just going to go over and be like, all right, let me just give them another bottle or, breastfeed them again. It's balance. Depending on where you are in that journey with your kid, you might very well have a baby who's hungry again, right? I'm not saying that they're never hungry after 3 hours. I'm just saying that like, it's not always the first thing. And sometimes if you're doing that, they're taking a million feeds throughout the day. They're agitated by the end of the day. They have this terrible witching hour. And then they're up a whole bunch at night to eat. And then they don't eat in the morning till 9 or 10 o'clock. And your days are just messed up. Right. So what I try to do is bring balance. I'm not saying rip feedings out from kids from all these different places. That's absolutely not the truth. A baby needs 24 to 32 ounces of milk. Okay. A toddler needs a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner, and maybe some supplemental nutritionally dense snacks as they're growing and getting more active, right? Giving a child chocolate milk and gummy bears, as one of my private sleep clients was doing at 8:30 at night while they watched YouTube to go to bed, we had to make some changes there. I'm like, okay, hey, that's like a lot of refined sugar. The blue light is pretty stimulating. Let's pull that back a little bit. Parenting's hard, man. And this is the judgment free zone at Tiny Transitions. Like, I'm here to help you and to help get your kids sleeping well. So sometimes it's just some of those things that you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Now, thank you for sharing. I understand why, is why I aim to do these trainings. Okay. Full feedings every 3 hours as best you can, because what it ends up doing is setting you up for the ideal daytime, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay. So intake is really important. If you have 5 feedings across the day every 3 hours, that's going to make your day roughly 7 o'clock a.m. waking up, right? 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock bedtime. Okay. So you're on what is called 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night schedule. Works beautifully for kids, probably the first 5 years of their life, frankly. But you can really get a little bit of leeway anywhere between 7 and 8 o'clock at night. Okay. Anything after that is generally too late. With newborns, I actually encourage parents to put them down for bed at 7 and then to either go in and nurse them at 10 o'clock if they're exclusively breastfeeding, like go in and physically wake them up for the first 8 weeks of life, 8 to 12 weeks, depending on size, and or let your spouse or partner go in and feed them at 10 and you get sleep, because then you can sleep from 7:30 till roughly the next wake up, which will be around 1 or 2 in the morning, and you can get a solid chunk of sleep. So not everybody's feeling like a big hot mess, because it's the reality of having a newborn. Everybody's sleep deprived and you need sleep to be able to care for your child. Okay. So you want to look at managing feedings around the naps and the schedule to try to get those 5 full feedings in the day. That's going to give you the best real estate, 24 to 32 ounces of milk in the day. Okay. If you have a baby who's like 4 months and still eating 3 or 4 times at night, which is a common challenge we deal with at Tiny Transitions, you have to basically start to dial that back a little bit. First, you have to ask yourself, are they eating for nutrition? Could be. We got to move it then gently. Or are they eating for habit, which also ends up being nutrition because by default they're taking in some intake, right? To sleep. Okay. So in both of those scenarios overnight, when we work with families, like we have to deliberately shift milk a little bit at a time into the day because there's no space right now. The day is full. So if you're eating 3 times overnight, we got to slowly dial back a little bit at a time from those feedings. Oh, and help your child to independently settle. Because if they're using the boob or a bottle as a mechanism to fall asleep, that's a prop. That's different from food. Okay, that's different from eating for nutrition. That's eating because they associate eating with sleeping, and that's how they fall asleep. So make no mistake, around 3 to 4 months, as they shift from stage to cycle sleep, they're going to start waking more overnight, because every time they pass through a sleep cycle, they're going, hi, I need your boob. Hi, I need the pacifier. Hi, you gonna rock me this time? Oh, need to eat again, right? And so you can get into this cycle where then for the weeks and months following, your child wakes at night looking for something to sleep. So that's what we want to try to keep separate, right? Eating to get the 24 to 32 ounces and do it in a thoughtful and deliberate way, or eating for the mechanism to fall asleep. That's a sleep association. Okay. So we've talked about, first and foremost, wake windows. That's number one in our 3 shifts. Number 2 is going to be intake. We want as much of that intake in the daytime as we can, ideally off of 5 feedings, 6 if you have a child between 0 and, I like to say 8 weeks, somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks. I like to wean off of that dream feed, because when a circadian rhythm changes, right, from stage to cycle sleep, you're actually falsely interrupting the deepest and most restorative sleep for your child. Okay. So you don't want to do that. You want them to sleep from 7 till 2 and then wake up on their own. If you go in at 10 after 12 weeks and wake them, you're going to create a wake up pattern for them where they're going to start to wake up after 12 weeks. And you certainly don't want that. Okay. So what you want to look at now, we've got intake, we've got wake windows, right? We've got these really great little Zoom integration hearts and stars and all the fun you can do out here. But we also have want versus need. Okay. Does your baby need you, or do they want you? And does your toddler need you, or do they want you to sit in the chair, right? Do they want you to lay in bed? This is a question that my husband I will credit to my shopping at Home Goods. And I come home with the most random stuff from Home Goods, but it makes me feel really good. And he goes, the next time you go, please don't buy anything unless you stand in front of it and go, do I want this or do I need this? Right. I've come home with too many like 6-foot Buddhas and all kinds of random stuff. So he's like, please stand in front of this and ask, do you want or do you need this 35-foot mirror for our living room, right? And so I kind of tell parents the same thing. Do you want or do you need, right? Babies could need us in the middle of the night for a variety of things: tooth, discomfort, fever, blowout, hunger, drop the pacifier falls out of the crib, lights are off, and they're dark, something fell. Oh my gosh, what do I do, right? Our job as parents is to always be accessible, okay? Our job as tired parents is to also get some sleep too, right? So I think as parents, there's confusion. A lot of times parents are like, I don't know. I mean, I think they need me to eat to go back to bed. I'm like, well, they do, but they want the food because that's how they fall asleep, right? So we've got to decouple the food, and then we've got to get the food going over to the daytime, and we've got to get the skill of sleep built up, right? And that's going to build what is right now very lopsided over the course of about 3 to 5 days shift. Sleep is a skill, my friends. When your baby learns, when your toddler learns that you go to sleep by doing X to sleep, rocking, bouncing, feeding, nursing, driving, it doesn't matter what it is. If that's how your child believes they go to bed, that's what they're going to seek every time they pass through a cycle and they arouse enough to know they're awake, and they need you to put them back to sleep, right? Need you to put them back to sleep because they do not know how. Okay. So we have to teach them this skill. We have to help them understand that it is, in fact, that they want the rocking, but they do not need the rocking. They're just deficient in the skill, right? And that's what sleep coaching and education does, helps a child to not be deficient in the skill. And it's one of the things that we teach inside of our Sleep Steps program. Okay. I'm going to take you through 5 days of information, but if you only catch today and you're like, okay, like, this is really good, but I'm ready to get started, right? Check out tinytransitions.com/sleep steps. It's the only program of its kind. It's $47, and you have the opportunity to get all of the coaching and course material. You have a community, and you have access to me and my team every week for live Zooms. So it's the only program like this at a price point that allows everybody to get quality sleep education at a price they can sleep well with. But that dives into, in each of the different segments of sleep steps, newborns, infants, and toddlers. Okay. There is a method to how you have to implement. And we're going to cover a lot this week. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the number one mistake parents make. And that's a really big one. So if you're going to be out here, you catch this one on the replay, make sure you listen to number 2, because we're going to talk about that on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, session 3, we're going to talk about bedtime, because a lot of people get anxiety going into bedtime. So you've got all this daytime stuff sorted. You listen to day 1 and you're like, okay, I'm going to do full feedings every 3 hours. I'm going to get the right schedule going. I'm going to start to isolate during bedtime if they want me or they need me to sleep, or they want me or need me to sleep for naps, right? And now what, right? We're going to dive into slowly decoupling things each day. It's a little too much to do it all in one day. I tend to overwhelm people with my knowledge. So we're going to cover it the rest of this week, and it's all free out here. But I want you to feel really good about where you're at. So my advice to you is, first, print the workbook. It's in the comments and below in the description. Excuse me. I talk a lot all the time. Second, I want you to start to track things. I want you to look at how often is your child eating, or for how long. If you have suggestions or questions, comment here. Happy to help. You can also find me out on Instagram at Tiny Transitions. We're here to help. We want you to sleep well. So you have to start with first looking at where your child is with their sleep needs and what their wake windows are. You have to make sure you're getting the right intake. And then you have to understand, do they possess the ability to settle, or am I the association that they need to go to sleep? Because if that's the case, you're going to have this hormone stew that we want to try to balance. We're going to dive more into hormone stew tomorrow. And I'm going to talk to you about the ideal schedules for every age and stage. So make sure you join us for session number 2. And I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in to the live out here. Hopefully this was helpful for you to understand the beginnings of working on sleep with your family and your child, and make sure they're getting what they need to thrive, that they're sleeping well because it's important, and that you're sleeping well because it's important as well. Thanks so much. Be sure to hit subscribe. My name's Courtney Zentz, the founder of Tiny Transitions, and I'll see you out here tomorrow. Bye for now.